Good evening, good evening, good evening, good evening. I bet you can't tell who I have on the show today. Dr. Hill, born in Morgantown, West Virginia, is the son of David Hill, the youngest son of Napoleon Hill and Florence Honor. Yes, he's still alive and living and promoting Napoleon Hill. Wait till you meet him. It's amazing. He graduated from high school in 1966 and spent time at sea on cargo ships until 1969, where he drafted into the service with the United States Marine Corps. From 1973 to 1976, he attended Vanderbilt University, where he earned a bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering. At graduation, he was commissioned as a second lieutenant and commenced service in the Marines as a field artillery officer. He later earned a Master of Science in Mathematics from the Naval Postgraduate School before teaching at the United States Naval Academy. As an officer, he commanded twice, led a team of military advisors into Southeast Asia, briefed the Soviet General Staff, served as an aide-de-camp to 2 Marine generals, and served in many crucial billets of the battery, battalion, and regiment level. He is also a certified scuba diver, he's certified in scuba, mountain, cold weather, and jungle welfare. He's a graduate of the Army's Command of General Staff College. Can you believe this? And it gets better and even more exciting. In 1995, Dr. Hill retired from the Marine Corps after 26 years of service to study medicine. Yeah. At the age of 53, he graduated from medical school and started a 3-year residency in family medicine. Dr. Hill is board certified in family medicine and holds certifications in wound care and hyperbaric medicine. He retired from medicine in June of 2022 and lives with his wife and 2 children in Bridgeport, West Virginia. For more than 20 years, Dr. Hill has been speaking, writing, and spreading the word about Napoleon Hill's science of personal achievement. Yes, and you're going to learn what you can do too if you're not already doing it. His association with this philosophy began at age 12 when his grandfather placed a copy of Think and Grow Rich in his hands and told him to read it. However, more than a dozen years passed before he understood the extraordinary nature of his grandfather's gift. What Hill learned from reading Think and Grow Rich changed his life twice. Once when he was 23 and again when he was 45. And here he is, Dr. J.B. Hill.
Hi, everybody.
Woohoo! Woohoo! Oh, it's such a pleasure to have you on. You are amazing. Amazing, 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 amazing. Can you tell
I've lived a long time, so I get to do a lot of things.
And you've done everything so well, and you're so smart, and you keep just like reinventing yourself.
Well, my dad used to tell me that you're never old until you reach a point where you're no longer changing. So I suppose I've taken that to heart.
I suppose you have.
But when I retired from the Marine Corps, I said, I'm what I'm always going to be. And then I went to medical school and I graduated from medical school. I said, well, that's what I'm always going to be. And then I adopted 2 kids from Russia and I became a dad. And I said, okay, I'm always going to be that. And I keep on doing something. Then I started speaking and writing. Here I am on your show.
And I am so blessed. And Dan says, JB is awesome in his own right. Hi, Dan Altmeyer. So Dr. Hill, can you tell us about your early life and how it influenced your career choices?
Oh, my career choices. Yeah. If you want to know a sad story of drifting through life, I was a rebellious child. And I have 25% of my grandfather's DNA. And if you know his history, he was kind of rough around the edges when he was young, and so was I. And I understood that independence meant I had to be financially independent from my family. So I left home at 18 and never looked back. And anyway, I ended up going to sea in the Merchant Marines. You know, you hear the Joseph Conrad thing, going to sea and delivering cargo around the world. I got to see a lot of the world. And I had an occupational deferment during the Vietnam War. But by the time 1972, The Vietnam War was starting to wind down. They didn't need as many cargo ships, so they reclassified me as a 1A and drafted me. And I ended up going to the Marine Corps. I was fortunate. I was 21 when I was drafted, and so I had some rough edges around from my experiences. So I kind of stood out from the other 18-year-old draftees in the Marines, and I just kind of took charge of things, and I made rank very, 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 very fast. And it was wartime, so they selected me for school. I went to Vanderbilt University, got a degree in mechanical engineering, and from there, the flight school, which is a story in itself, and took it from there. But when I was in the Marines, I was good at what I did. I had the advantage of age and experience, and I outworked everybody. That's one of the strengths I've always had in life. I've always outworked everyone around me, and so I had a reasonable amount of success, and I had pure respect, and I enjoyed what I was doing, and so I was happy, and I just kind of drifted through my life until I had to make a decision what to do with my future, and that's when I picked up Think and Grow Rich and read it the second time. So that's kind of it. That's in a nutshell. Like most people, I drifted through most of the greatest reason for failure among successful people, the greatest reason for it is their success itself. They trade their dreams for the security of a paycheck. And once you get into it, and how do you get out of it? Yeah, I'm not picking on historians. I love history. I read history all the time. I listen to podcasts on history all the time at night. But when you're growing up, whoever said they wanted to go out and teach history when they're 12, 13? And yet, how do we get history teachers? Because you get into school, and for one other reasons, you start studying that stuff, and then you end up teaching it. And that's the way it happens in life. And then you could trade, your dreams that you ever wanted to be when you grew up, whether it be a spaceman or an astronaut. You traded those dreams for the security of that paycheck. So, and that's what I did. I'm like everyone. I'm like every one of you. The fact that I'm Napoleon Hill's grandson didn't give me a special conduit to him up there.
Well, what was it like growing up as the grandson of Napoleon Hill? I read you didn't even meet him until you were 12. Your family went up to see him, or down to see him in South Carolina.
If you know the history of my grandfather, you know that he was married a few times. Okay. In fact, I've just released information about his first wife, which nobody knew about.
What fun.
Yes, you'll find it in the lecture I sent you. Okay. Anyway, it was a marriage that he had annulled, or it was annulled, I should say. And then he married my grandmother about 2 years after that marriage was annulled, and they were married for 27 years. And so my grandfather was out making a living for the family. He rarely had, from until I would say the first 7 years of their marriage, they were living together as man and wife. Wherever he went, she went. But after 7 years, it became more and more difficult for him to make a living with her there. So she and the children, the boys, would go back to Lumberport, West Virginia, and he'd go do what he did to make a living. So basically, the philosophy of success, creating that, was the price. The price he paid for that was his family. He lost his family. I have all his love letters. My grandmother saved every love letter she had from him. And so I've been to track his history, where they lived and what was going on in his life, because he was so excited. I met this guy and I met that guy, and we're going to sell this, and we're going to be in the money, and he would make a fortune and start a business, and then he'd lose the business and lose the fortune, and he'd send for my grandmother and his kids while he was affluent. And then when the money started to go, or when the business cracked, he would send them back to Lumberport, West Virginia. So when the divorce occurred, my grandmother divorced him. He didn't achieve his great success until after that, and there was some bitterness on my grandmother's part. So she inherited the company, or she inherited the controlling interest in the family enterprises that he walked away from. I mean, he could have traded everything for his paycheck. I mean, my family owned an oil and gas company. It still exists today, and they were affluent. My grandmother's aunt was married to the governor of the state of West Virginia. He could have lived a life of luxury, But if he had done that, he would never have been able to fulfill the commitment he made with Andrew Carnegie. So he left all that behind and went to Chicago to make, which is where you needed to be in those days. So anyway, the price he paid, and so we went, yeah, to write that book. So the price he paid for that was his family. That's kind
It's a
of the
high
story behind it.
price. But you have amazing ones right there in your office.
Yes,
You were
I do.
showing me before we started.
Yeah, I've collected every published hardback edition of it, including, except for the second printing. I don't think they actually delineated or marked the second printing as the second printing. I think we went right to the first, and then the second had the same date and time, and then they came out with the third one. The third one's marked third printing, but the second one is there are no existing copies of it. I feel confident of that.
So actually today I met someone who had never read Think and Grow Rich and didn't know anything about Napoleon Hill. And ladies and gentlemen, if you get to pick up a new copy, you can see some say for men and women who resent poverty, original unedited text, 1937. Dr. Hill just pointed that out to me right before the podcast. I was like, that is so cool. But you can get the hardback, you can get the softback, and you can get, I think this is an old one. I'm trying to think of, my dad gave me this one.
That's in the 60s. That's from the 60s, yes.
This book could be worth $1 million to you. I do believe my dad gave it to me, and it did take me a while to read it. And then I read it and I got some, and because Dr. J.B. Hill was coming on, I dived into everything and I went, oh my gosh, that I've been doing, but I've been a little drifting through it. And like, I get a little, and I'm like, and then, and I'm like, oh my gosh. And then I pulled out my contract to myself, and of my 3 things, I've actually done 2. And I went, oh, it's time to up the ante.
I have a friend that's read that. I have a friend that's read that book 300 times. So.
Yes, and I have to pick it up. That's a lot. And he's probably enormously successful. I think I read something about him.
$200 million, his business. He developed it selling door to door, business worth $200 million. And he spent 4 hours with Nelson Mandela. Yeah, he was quite a man. When he died less than a year ago, maybe 6 months ago, he was buried in Durham, North Carolina. And the police, so many people came to his funeral that they had to shut the interstate down until they got police out there to direct traffic. It was that bad. He's a black guy, not bad for a black guy. Sharecropper's son, you know. And he used to teach. Of course, he got people to sell door to door like he did. He started his own company, and they couldn't go out and sell in the morning at 8 o'clock. So he would bring them in and he would teach them the principles of success. And then that was a crew of people he sent out into the streets.
Ooh.
Yeah. It was interesting.
Grace Cavalieri has a question. How did your early childhood lead to your success?
Well, I mean, I read Think and Grow Rich when I'm 12. It didn't. My dad taught me ethics, okay, but he was stern. I mean, he had the Hill temper, and he was military. And so I as soon as I could get out of Dodge, I got out of Dodge, graduated from high school and went to sea. So he didn't influence me that way. We were aware of him, Mom and Dad. Mom never mentioned him, okay, and Dad would mention him from time to time, Napoleon. There was a schism between, he was the youngest of them, and so the divorce affected him more than he affected his elder brothers, Jimmy and Blair. Blair was the boy that was born without ears.
Yes, that's an amazing story.
It was an interesting story about that. My grandmother showed me an old Vitrola, and the story behind it that Blair had gotten. The story behind that is when Blair was 5, okay, he could never really hear. You could shout, put your lips against his cheekbone and shout, and he would hear a noise, but he could not really hear. Well, the family Napoleon got a Vitrola, a console Vitrola, and that's a record player. You wind it up, and it has a big RCA Victor, cone on it. And Uncle Blair went over to that Vitrola, and he was fascinated by this record going around and around. This is 1918. This was novel. This was new. And he put his little hands up on the side of the cabinet and rested his teeth on it. And all of a sudden, music exploded in his mind for the first time, bone conduction. And he spent so much time on that patrol listening to music, so he could actually something he could hear. He gnawed like a beaver, a groove in the side of that, about that deep and about that wide. And and then he went around and did the other side too. My grandmother still had that. It was in the attic. She showed it to me, Uncle Blair.
Do you have it?
Oh no, no, no. I got letters from. I mean, grandfather and I wrote after he gave me a copy of Think and Grow Rich. I would write him, at least around Christmas time. Good heavens, the guy sent me gave me $10, right? And but I never saved his letters. But they found some of my letters with the Napoleon Hill papers, so that
Oh,
I'd
that's
written him.
neat.
Yeah, I still have them. I'm embarrassed by them now, but
But that he saved them shows that he cared about you and you were
well,
important in his life.
my grandmother saved her letters from him, and she was, I even have the letter that he wrote to my grandmother's mother, introducing himself as basically asking permission to marry her daughter. So she was a widow at the time. Yeah. That was an interesting time back here. I mean, Napoleon he was not, I hate to say that he was unlike men today, but he was totally unlike men today. And maybe he was a man of his times, but by the time he was 24, he had owned, well, 27, okay? He had owned a lumber company, two automobile companies, a dealership. He pioneered the idea of drop shipping, and he had bought an interest in Mount Vernon Inn in Washington, D.C., and Martha Washington Candy Company. And he's 27 years old, and he's gone through these companies. He's lost them for one reason or another. And I'll tell you, I think he was bipolar. And I think I gave him the drive and the energy to, and perhaps illusional capability at times to succeed. But he was so talented and had that incredible work ethic. He could pull it off. And they didn't make diagnoses like that in those days. I mean, there was no treatment for it. And the reason why I say that is history of tremendous success followed by failure. And generally the failure was because he didn't have the resources. He'd go in, he bought two colleges, or one he created and one he bought. How do you buy a college if you don't have any money? But he did it. Okay. How do you start magazines if you don't have the money to publish? To publish the first issues and distribute them. But he did it, and he was always able to do that. And he could sell himself. He could sell his ideas, and he had so much drive and enthusiasm. He made them work. But inevitably, one reason or another, they crashed. And those days, things were a little different too. I mean, you could go to the bank and borrow money. This is, just before the Roaring '20s, and you could borrow money and sign a note for it, and the banker could call in your note in 30 days or 90 days, and if you didn't pay off the note, you lost the business or you lost the property, whatever you financed it. So it was a very risky time, but it was an exciting time. Everybody had these newfangled cars, and he was a man about town. In Washington, D.C., when he was creating all those companies, he met my grandmother. He advertised in the newspaper, Lonely Hearts, the personal section, and said that he was a young professional and looking for a woman of good family, object matrimony. So he presented at this upscale house in Chevy Chase. That was the residence of the former governor of West Virginia, George Atkinson. He was a sitting federal appeals court justice, and he and his wife, my grandmother's aunt, Elmira Louise Corner Camden Atkinson Hill. But anyway, he had presented at that house, and because of a letter that he received. And the letter didn't come from my grandmother. The letter came from one of the Atkinson's girls, the eldest one. She was 24. And so my grandmother answered the door, though, when Napoleon Hill presented at that address, that upscale address. And they looked at each other. And he was there to see the Atkinson girl, but they looked at each other and fell in love instantly. That's the story. And she wasn't still in high school. She was 18, but she was still in high school at that time. And they fell in love, and she was the love of his life, judging by the love letters he was writing, right up to the year before they divorced. He was always writing her love letters. But she'd gotten disillusioned, The promise of wealth, she'd always end up living at home with her rich family, but being supported by her rich family. And that's hard. That's hard.
And you have those letters you mentioned,
Oh
yes?
yeah, yeah, I do. In fact, I use them for reference to explain. Well, here's an example. What you can tell from letters. He married my grandmother in 1910. Okay, he didn't. Although my grandmother lived 150 miles from his family in Southwest Virginia. Okay, and we're in West Virginia, but so due south, about 150 miles. Uh, he never took my grandmother and his grandchildren to meet his parents till 1922.
Yeah.
Okay, and why is that? Well, she was an incredibly affluent. She was a blue blood. Her aunt Almira Atkinson could trace 9 lines to to Revolutionary War heroes. Okay, and they were the class of people that her grandmother would go. My mother's grandmother would go to Europe and come back on. Well, they didn't go on the Titanic, but they come back on that class of ships, first class. They go to Europe for 6 months. So, in fact, one of my grandmother's cousin lived in the Clark lady. Ethel Clark was her name. She lived in Washington D.C. and she married off her daughters to counts without any money, French counts, but they had a title. So her daughters got to become titled. So I mean, it was that kind of social class that was my grandmother, and then my grandfathers they were farmers, and the biggest difference if you look at the two families, they both had about 2 dozen aunts and uncles, okay, and great aunts and uncles, and Napoleon's great uncles, every single one of them fought for the South, okay. And you would think, well, from West Virginia, my grandmothers must have fought, her uncles, about the same number, about a dozen of them must have fought for the North, right? Truth of the matter is, they didn't fight for anyone. And the reason why they didn't fight is they didn't have to. They called this a rich man's war and a poor man's fight. And that's exactly what it was, because if you could pay $300, you could get exempted from the draft and pay some poor Irish migrant to fight for you. And so not one of my grandmother's great uncles fought during the Civil War, but every single one of Napoleon Hill's uncles did. So that tells you the difference between the families. And so I think Napoleon was ashamed of his rural background and didn't want to bring my grandmother to meet his family, even though his father was a most remarkable man, a self-made dentist. His father was he was a farmer. He married his first wife, Napoleon's mother. She was literally the farmer's daughter, the daughter next door, John Henry Blair. He married her. She was 16. He was 18. He'd cleared 50 acres of land, and he built a log cabin, and he moved her into this log cabin. They were an hour from the nearest road, and farmed. And Napoleon was born to her, Sarah Blair. He loved the printed words, so he bought a set of type that you could type, print newspapers and books with, and he made himself a print press by hand. He called it the Zephyr because he was whittling the parts. In the summer times, he could hear the wind in the trees. That's called the Zephyr. So he created the first newspaper in Southwest Virginia and started publishing a newspaper. And that's where Napoleon Hill started collecting, writing little stories and collecting gossip about people. But anyway, he then moved into town, Napoleon's father, and he became a dentist. He got ordered books and taught himself how to fill teeth. He got a catalog. You pay $5 and you get the makings to do 50 teeth. He studied the anatomy, learned how to do it, became a dentist. And because he was a dentist, he had this general story. He cut hair. He was a barber. There were times when outlaws would come into town, and he would take him up into the mountains to take care of people, dental problems for outlaws. So it was a rough time. Napoleon came from that era. His stepsister, when Napoleon's mother died, Doctor, the dentist, married another woman, and she had 3 children of her own. And one of them was 2 boys and a girl. That one became a superintendent in schools, one became a dentist, and another one the girl became a bank teller. And one day somebody came into Wise County, Virginia, and tried to rob the bank. And they only had the 3 women behind the cages. There were no men in the bank, but they had a 6-gun. So as soon as that robber left the door and went out into the street, she grabbed that 6 gun. Aunt Willie grabbed that 6 gun and chased him down the street and shot him in the buttocks. So he was arrested and went to trial for armed robbery. Well, in those days, they didn't have hotels or anything, so the family came in for the trial. The robber's family came in for the trial, and Aunt Willie put them up in her own home. The man that she'd shot in the buttocks and pantsed him. So it was a wild time, and that's the kind of the background that Napoleon came from, But it was an interesting time. So I don't know. I've been talking too long about that.
Oh no, it's so interesting. I don't think people know that. Do you have any memorabilia about that from behind you? Because your background is so exciting.
No, not from that time.
You've got some very cool stuff. What's your favorite well, probably everything's your favorite because that's why it's there.
I have his definite major purpose. He wrote it out. Yeah, and he and Annie Lou signed it. I printed it out and put it online. It's out there. You guys have it too somewhere. But anyway, I have the handwritten copies of it. I have love letters signed by him. On this wall right here, I have a check signed by Napoleon Hill, and right above it, I have a canceled check signed by his grandfather, by his father. So I have my grandfather's and my great grandfather checks and some signatures up there. So yeah. My legacy from him was Think and Grow Rich. Same thing you got.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I mean, he put it in my hand, said, read it, and it changed my life. So.
And it can change yours, ladies and gentlemen, if you haven't picked it up yet. So you read it at 12, and then you read it again. I forget, 23, 26.
Yeah, I was in the Marines. I was at Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. Remember, I said I had become independent of my parents early because
18, you left.
So I was in the Marine Corps.
Man.
Yeah, I was a sergeant in the Marine Corps, and down at Camp Lejeune, I was at the Piggly Wiggly's. Piggly Wiggly's, a grocery store they have in North Carolina. And I was at the checkout counter, and I'd been making my decisions, and I was lonely. There were no girls there. I mean, there were 20,000 Marines and no girls. And I was lonely, and it was a Friday night. I picked up a 6-pack of beer at Piggly Wiggly, and and I didn't realize I was miserable, but I was. I saw copies of Think and Go Rich on a little spiral, at the end, trying to sell books to people, like they have candy bars today. In those days, yeah, looks like that. And so I bought the book. I took it home, and I read the book through, and this time it floored me. I mean, it's only 287 pages. It's simply written. It's a simply written book. I read it right through, and the more I read it, the more excited I got in it. And then I didn't take a note. And then I nonstop. I continued right on, and I started writing in it. And writing, I wrote notes all over the book. And I got to the back of the book where it was talking about excuses, and I realized that almost every one of those excuses I've been making for my whole life. And I said, why don't I just do what my grandfather told me to do? Why don't I just take his advice? So I said, but how was I going to do it? I knew I needed a definite major purpose. I didn't have one. So I took out a piece of paper and I wrote down everything I ever wanted to be in my life, everything. And no matter how ridiculous it was, it'd be a cowboy, be a fireman, be a policeman, be a spaceman, become a doctor. And then I looked at my little list of things, and I was trying to come up with a definite major purpose in life. And I marked out to become a doctor because I didn't have the grades or money. It's interesting because I am a doctor now, right? But back then, I said I can't do it. And that's another story, by the way. But anyway, I said, become a spaceman. I marked that out for the same reasons and so on. I marked out the whole list except for one thing. One thing was left, and that was to finish my education. So I took out a piece of paper, and how am I going to do that? And I wrote out a plan, and I executed the plan. And it took me a year to get into the college. I decided to choose to let the Marines send me to college. I mean, it was get out of the Marine Corps, work, and go to school. It was get out of the Marine Corps, use with the GI Bill, work, maybe ask my parents for help, okay, or stay in the Marine Corps and apply for a scholarship. So I decided that's what I would do. So I burned my bridges, re-enlisted for 6 years as an enlisted man. And because I didn't want to stay enlisted, I wanted to be a commissioned officer. Mm-hmm. So I used that as an incentive to keep me going. And then I took a year out of my life studying vocabulary, mathematics, et cetera. And I got selected for the program, and they sent me off to Vanderbilt. So that changed my life the first time. The second time was when I made the decision to leave the Marine Corps after 26 years. It was about 20 years after that time that I did that. But after 26 years total, I was at a party, a battalion party, and my battalion surgeon came to me and we're chatting, and he knew that I was at the end of my tour, and he asked me if I knew where I was going. I said, well, I've gotten orders to Okinawa, and he said, and I said, but I don't know if I want to go or not, because you can turn down orders once in your life and then retire. And I said something about retiring, and he asked me, so, well, what did you want to do before you came in the Marine Corps? And I laughed and I said, Doc, I wanted to be a doctor at one time like you. And he said, well, you still can. And I said, what do you mean I still can? He said, well, they have laws against age discrimination these days. There was a woman in her 40s in my residency class. If you want to go to it, you probably can do it. So I thought about it. And my alternative was to go to Okinawa, Japan for 3 years. And I wrote to 5 different schools to see if this was something I could actually do at my age. And 2 never responded, because I said, I'm academically competitive. Is it reasonable for someone my age to be able to think about going to medical school? And then University of Hawaii wrote back and told me very frankly, few if any non-Hawaiians get into their school. And then one school wrote back and said, we do not discriminate based on age, race, sex, the party line. And then West Virginia University, my home state, said, hey, military officers make good doctors. You have the discipline to do what it takes to come in. You bring a wealth of experience. If you want to do it, you should try it. So I went to my wife and I said, I want to retire. I want to go to medical school. She goes, wilt thou go, I go. And I had to turn down promotion, mind you, to lieutenant colonel. So the difference between lieutenant colonel pay with the possibility of becoming a bird colonel was the difference between never having to work again a day in my life and having to work if I retired a major, which is what I did. And so off to medical school I went. I went back to West Virginia. I did 2 years of prerequisites, and then I applied to medical school. I got in. So at 47, I started medical school. And I found out what I was thinking about that a few years ago, and I went to my wife and I said, that was very supportive of you. I mean, to support me in this endeavor. 9 years I went without a salary, except for my pension. Well, I'm that's the price I pay. And she goes, well, I didn't mean it the way you think I meant it. I said, wilt thou go, I go? You didn't mean it? And she said, no, I didn't. She said, what I was thinking, if you screw it up for you, you screw it up for me too. That's what she was thinking.
Oh, no.
I said, you should have told me that. You ruined the thing. But she was right. But but that itself is a power. The sexual transmutation, right? I call that love. The transmutation of love is a power to drive you. Because I was in my 3rd year of medical school, and I'd always been a top 5% mind you, but I didn't think as fast as the other kids did anymore when I was in medical school. So I worked as hard as it's possible to work, and I'm only in the bottom of the middle third. It was a struggle. If I took a break from studying, it was to go to Walmart to buy food, or to clean the kitchen or the toilet or whatever. That was my break from studying for 2 years. I'm in my 3rd year, and I'm studying in Lewisburg, and all of a sudden I get these glowing lights, zigzag glowing lights. I didn't know what they were. It turned out they were the auras that are associated with migraine headaches, but I didn't have the migraine headache. And I'd never seen these they're called battlements, because they looked on a military map, 2 lines with zigzags looked like fortifications. That's a symbol for it. And these were glowing. And they lasted about 15 minutes. And during that 15 minutes, I'm a medical student. I begin to worry, do I have a brain tumor? And so when the idea came to me that I had a brain tumor, I might have a brain tumor, all of a sudden I felt a tremendous relief off my shoulders. And because nobody could expect me to finish medical school if I had a brain tumor. And I wouldn't have to do what I was doing. And looking back at it, I realized that it was the the promises I made to my wife, the fact that she put her life in my hands, that's love. All right. And I think that was transmuted into drive. That was enabled me to undergo the pressure that I was undergoing in medical school for all that time. I think that's what it was. And I did, and of course, I found out I didn't have a brain tumor, and I had mixed feelings on that. Okay, but it was just a migraine without the word. I get that from time to time now, but it's lost its magic for me anymore. So I ended up, but doing it. That second time, and I told you I'd never shut up if you got me talking, right?
I love it. It's great.
That second time
Go ahead.
when I went to medical school, I was 47 years old, and people make a big deal out of that. Okay. In fact, that's probably why uh, when I approached the Napoleon Hill Foundation, they would even talk to me because a lot of people are trying to get on the success field, right? And Napoleon Hill's grandson, am I trying to, use my grandfather's name or whatever?
Really?
So they didn't know who I was. They didn't know. No, they didn't know who I was. So that's what I thought. So uh, that's what I thought when I first went into it. I forgot my train of thought. So I'm pulling a Biden here. What am I talking?
You're in medical school and you've been there and you started 46.
Oh yeah. So, a lot of people make a huge deal out of it, but the truth of the matter, that wasn't nearly as significant as the first time way back when I was a young sergeant and I took out that list of paper. All right. And because I took it on faith that it would work. When I was 47, I knew it would work. I knew if it could be done, I could do it. All right. Oh, ye of little faith, or blessed are those who have not seen and yet believe, right? I mean, I knew it could be done at 47 because I'd proved it to myself. And over the years, I'd seen it work so many more times. But that first time, when I took it on faith and followed the recipe for success, I call Think and Grow Rich a recipe. Follow it. You don't have to understand it.
Mm-hmm.
Just follow it, and it will take you to success. Is the way it works. That one time I told you, I'd marked out things like become a doctor on a piece of paper, right? I didn't have the grades and the money. And of course, I became a doctor because over the years I went to school and I got the grades. And then when I retired, I had the money because I was pensioned and I didn't have to work those 9 years, right? So looking back at it in hindsight, those negatives for not tempting it 30 years earlier were nothing. They weren't negatives. They were simply the tasks that I needed to accomplish in order to achieve my goal. You don't have the money, take an extra job, start conserving. You don't have the grades, go to school and get the grades. Okay, so you use negatives to outline a problem for a solution is what they're good for. You can't formulate a solution unless you understand the things you have to accomplish. But if you treat them as obstacles, then you never get anywhere. And that's a major difference in my mind thought between now and back then, is I realized that these negatives are simply telling you what you have to do to achieve your goal, if you want to achieve your goal. Yes, so that's the difference in thought between the two times that I changed my life from Think and Grow Rich.
So you just have to put the right things in your recipe, and what it doesn't make a good cake or whatever you're making, you have to take out and keep being more and more specific. You have to be crystal clear on what it is, or else it's not going to turn out. You're going to have pork loin instead of.
Well, it doesn't always, overcoming adversity and Napoleon Hill wrote about learning from adversity and defeat, right? Mm-hmm. You notice the word learning from it, but he didn't teach you how to overcome it, did he?
No, because it's helpful.
Yeah, he didn't teach you how. So if you look at the principles that you have to array toward it, a little story I like to tell about this. If you science, first off, science has proven that the way we handle adversity and defeat depends on the way the brain handles it depends on the nature of the defeat itself. For example, if the defeat is something it's something you control, your mind handles that defeat in one area of the brain, and it's over something that you cannot control. It's handled in a completely different part of the brain, that adversity and defeat. For example, if I go to college and I party, I flunk out, and then I blame it all on my professors because I couldn't understand them. They were all foreign or whatever, but I know I partied, okay? And 10 years later, if I want to go back to school, okay, and I apply accurate thought to why I failed, okay? All
There's
right.
your
And then
daughter.
hi, is that my daughter? Hi, Adelina. Wow. Oh, I better not say anything that you don't like. Okay. But if I do that, okay, the accurate thought is then applied to the definite major purpose, I can accomplish the goal because I've identified the reasons why I failed. All right.
Mhm.
But what happens when the adversity is over something you don't control? Let's say it's a racial prejudice. Let's
Okay.
say your spouse walks out on you. Okay.
Okay.
Let's say that there's financial calamity. Okay. How do you handle that? Well, I'll tell you how the brain handles it. It routes that failure to the part of the brain that wants to go rage. You get furious, angry. You ever seen divorced couples fight? Okay. People rioting in the streets due to prejudice? Yes. Okay. Yeah. Things that they cannot control stimulates the brain to treat it with rage. So, how do you handle with that? You have to do is channel that rage. You got to use accurate thinking, okay, and realize that rage itself can be transformed into a force to lead you to success. The best way to get even is to get rich, right?
Yeah.
So your accurate thought, you may not be able to accomplish your original different DMP, but what you do is you choose another one, something that is attainable, because the first one simply isn't attainable. You set aside that rage because you couldn't accomplish it and use it as an energy to drive you to success on the new definite major purpose, something that is attainable. So it's an interesting way to look at it. I've lectured on this from time to time.
It's very interesting. And what happens to the people that go and hide? Nothing. Or do they
They never go. They
come
never
out
get
and
off the bench.
book?
They don't get to play the game. They never get off the bench.
Oh, oh,
I mean, you can't. What good does it do to riot in the streets or to shoot your wife? Okay, what good does it do? So, doesn't do any good at all. Get you in trouble.
yeah. Every time. So you're doing all of this. What inspired you to start writing and speaking about Napoleon Hill's philosophy?
I was at the World Learning Center in Chicago, which we no longer have. We've given it up because it wasn't as effective as it made better effect with the money, I think, spent elsewhere. And Don Green was out there,
Oh,
and at the
I
time,
was there last week.
and yes, and Judy Williams had asked me to come speak, just to a group of kids from not inner city kids from a juvenile detention center. And I said, yeah, I can do that. I'm a Marine, so I know how to I have the vernacular that's appropriate. And so I wrote a little speech to give to them.
Uh-huh.
And I got out there and I get to Chicago and I get there a day early. And Judith comes to me and she said, well, okay, well, great. Glad to have you here. She said, good news. There's been a change of plans. You're not talking to juvenile offenders because they had this HM1 flu that everyone was afraid of, before COVID. Remember that? We all had to get 2 flu shots, different kinds. So they didn't want the kids out of the detention center unless they bring it back in. So I replaced them with an inner city band, high school band. Well, I had written a speech for juvenile offenders, and now I'm going to go to teach the high school students.
Oh,
So that night I reworked the speech, and it went pretty good, I guess, because Don was in the audience. Don Green, the CEO of the Napoleon Hill Foundation,
yes.
and over dinner he said, "You want to speak in WISE at every year at the University of Virginia?" And I have a habit of committing myself to do things instantly, making up my mind instantly. I have never spoken like that before, but I knew that it would be an experience, and I knew that if I said no, I would regret it. That was the thoughts. My first thought was no, but I knew if I said no, I would regret it. So I said yes. So I ended up going to University of Virginia and giving the speech there. I gave 2 speeches there, and then that led to a speech in Pittsburgh to some real estate salesmen, and then that led to some direct marketing speeches. I went to 1,100 people, and then 3,000 people, then 12,000 people, then 50,000 people. So I've had, yeah, it was fun. On the 50,000 people, and we were in Las Vegas, and it was so big they didn't have a facility big enough for us, and they had 2 different stages and simulcast it, and it was simulcasted between the 2 stages and in 7 countries. And
Wow.
before I spoke, I was backstage, and I'm looking out there, and they got boom boom music. They got 20-foot video monitors on either side of you, and you walk out there, and you're just a little guy on the stage. And I said, whew. I said, I took a deep breath, and I says, you know what? I'm just going to go out there and have fun. I said, I'm the guy with the coat and tie in the middle of the audience. Okay, what I get to say stands. Nobody can ask me questions. Nobody's going to know that how little I actually know. But on this day, this stage right now, I am the expert. And that's what I said to myself, and I went out and did it, had fun. So, yeah, yeah. So
You
I, so I had fun doing that. I had fun doing that. I was on. I was invited to a to speak again in Vegas. Not as many people, 8,000, and they were direct marketers, but from different organizations. You know, they had A.L. Williams people, they had Amway, they had Organo Gold, they had different organizations. So you were not allowed to talk about your specific product because it was straight motivation. And they had real big name. Bob Proctor spoke at the same
Ooh,
place.
nice.
So I was invited to speak out there by Shane Moran, who was part of Organo Gold, and he wanted to surprise the audience. Here I have Napoleon Hill's grandson. And
Yeah.
he said, I'll give you 10 minutes. So I gave my 10-minute adversity speech. That's what I did. And I memorized it. And meanwhile, Shane's up on stage and he's got the crowd going because he can, direct marketers, they can get you going. And he had 8,000 direct marketers going. I mean, he had them going. And his time went, and the time he gave me went, and 10 more minutes behind me went. And the stage manager comes up to me and said, how much are you going to take? And I said, 10 minutes. And he said, well, you don't have 10 minutes. You have to cut it short. I said, I can't cut it short. The way I had memorized this particular speech was one sentence suggested the next. And you can do that in short speeches. Otherwise, you have to do a compartmental thing. So, if I leave the speech, how do I get back in? Because the next thought comes from the previous thought. So he said, I said, I can't do it. You're going to have to give me the 10 minutes. And I said, what are you going to do if I don't do it? And he says, well, we've been known to flip the lights on and off. And I said, you do that, you're going to have your right on the hand because I'm going to tell a story and I'm going to have the audience in my hand. So we go out there. I go out there to speak, and I'm aware of this guy in the background, and my mind is thinking while I'm speaking. And then I said, you know what? I can probably cut out a few lines here. That was a mistake because I cut out the few lines and then I couldn't get back in. And so then I ended up ad-libbing somehow. But anyway, I talked to Shane later. He said, well, I didn't notice anything. So apparently I did it seamlessly. So yeah, I've done some speaking. I've had some fun with it. Yeah, it takes me a long time to prepare. It takes me months to write something because I write it and rewrite it. And then I have to research it. And people expect something from me that they don't expect from other people. So
Right.
I'm directly connected, right?
Are you channeling him? Like,
no. Yeah, that's the last thing he would want me to do. If I tried to compete with grandfather, I'd never no one would listen to me. So I do neuroplasticity. He figured out what works, and he put it all together in an encyclopedia book, Think and Go Rich. And I can't surmount it. Nobody's been able to surmount it. That's why everybody quotes him and copies him because it's all there in that one little 287-page book. So what I do is I explain why it works. I know why it works. Like I said, your mind, for example, negative thoughts are directed. You think them up here in the prefrontal cortex, and there are fibers from the prefrontal cortex to a little organ in the middle of the brain called the amygdala, and that's where data is processed that may be a threat to you, and you stimulate it with fear. So if you're have some fear of speaking, you stimulate yourself forgetting your lines in front of an audience, and then your amygdala reacts by making you not want to do these things, by raising your heart rate, by making you sweat, all right, by creating the conditions of fear, and you can make that happen in your conscious mind. Panic attacks. Those panic attacks are direct. Those little neural networks are well defined to the amygdala. They found that the absence of these neural networks to the amygdala is associated with courage, but the presence of them is associated with fear, which is interesting. So the brain, the God gave us this brain and designed it for us to achieve success. One of my favorite quotes from Napoleon Hill, He said that men and women search all their lives for wealth and fame, never realizing that the source for both lies within their own brain. He wrote that in Magic Letter of Success. And later on in life, he got kind of metaphysical because he was saying there's just too much. You've got to connect to universal intelligence. But who knows? He may have been right. I used to I'm kind of a scientist because in math, physics, and I always discounted what he said about that. I said, was he talking telepathy? God, what is he talking about? And I used to think that. I said, well, he got just spiritual at the end of his life and let it go at that because he wrote Think and Grow Rich when he wasn't metaphysical. And I had that one quote from Magic Ladder of Success. But now quantum physics has taught us that the universe is connected to everything in the universe is connected to everything else by something called a Higgs field. And the matter itself is nothing more than a vibration in the Higgs field. So why, if all matter is connected to all other matter in the universe by a field, something called a Higgs field, why can't there be something metaphysical? I don't know. I'll let the theologians decide on that. But, so I don't discount my grandfather in anything. He figured out what works. You let people like me try to figure out why it works.
And everyone's using it, quoting it, and taking liberties with it.
Absolutely. Oh, they are. But most of the big ones, like Tony Robbins, you can't take his course without hearing about Napoleon Hill and quotes, and he credits it. Same with Bob Proctor. All the great ones. They took directly from him. But he borrowed too. He read Orson Swett Martin. I'm starting to read this book here called The Secret of Achievement. And on page 7 of it, I came across the first principle in it, and it's on enthusiasm. And I always thought enthusiasm was, it's principle, but it's kind of in the back, so you don't piss off friends and people and stuff like that. But it's much more than that. Can I read you a little of this?
Yes, please do.
This is a quote by Oliver Wendell Holmes, okay? Many years ago, in walking among the graves in Mount Auburn, I came upon a plain, upright marble slab which bore an epitaph of only 4 words. But to my mind, they meant more than all the labored inscriptions on all the surrounding monuments. The 4 words were, she was so pleasant. She was so pleasant. That was all, and it was enough. That was one note. That one note revealed the nature of a life of which I knew and asked nothing more. She was, and then he wrote a little poem, a happy soul that all the way to heaven had made a summer day. Oh. He called her Miss Cheerful, and he said, Miss Cheerful cannot be called pretty. Seeing her for the first time, one cannot help thinking, even if he does not say it, what a plain Jane. Yet her friendly face caused others not to think of it. The juniors at Sunday school who loved her as their superintendent never think of it. Farthest of all, the thought from those in the home that is wonderfully brightened by her presence. So if enthusiasm can define a person's life, it's got to be an important principle of success. And I should write about it sometime. I'm going to read about it in this book, I'm sure.
Yes, definitely. That's actually quite beautiful.
Yeah. There's all kinds of things if you go back and read them. I have another book here by Dale Carnegie. This was published in 1955.
Yeah.
And I've highlighted this. In it, I highlighted it. It said, every day is a new day to a wise man. Every day is a new day to a wise day, which means puts the things in the past and leave them there. My whole life, I've been able to get over things and hardships in life by thinking of Voltaire's famous line, which is even this will pass. Mm-hmm. When I'm confronted with something, I think of it, this will pass, get over it. Mm-hmm. If I do something bad, own up to it because this will pass. And he's saying the same thing. Every day is a new day to a wise man. So there's great wisdom in these old books. They're worth reading.
And you can adapt it. My acting teacher, Glenn Morshower, he says, that's old, that's new, goodbye. And you actually turn your body to say goodbye to it and let it go. And you're done.
That's right. You were acting yesterday. What did you do? What were you doing?
I did a scene and it got my second personal best from Glenn Morshower. So I was like all excited.
All right.
And, I am reinventing myself, and I am an actress and a
Good
writer
for you.
now.
Good for you.
So, yes, it's very fun. And I can't imagine at this time speaking in front of as many people as you've been speaking. And I've done a few, and it is lots of fun. You have
It
to
is.
take that energy and harness it though, because I was like, after you said, forget your words, and Patricia says, gain expectancy wisdom by leaving your excuses behind.
There you go.
Absolutely.
That's
Because
right.
we are amazing. We want to go back to your brain there. So what did you do? You just went and you didn't worry about it. You just was like, hey, here I am.
Well, there was a time when I made a decision as a military officer that could get my boss in trouble. And basically I was the regimental escorts, means I was in charge of logistics for an infantry regiment. And there was a battle between my colonel and the base commander, who was a general, one-star general, over barracks for the troops. And I came in the middle of this battle. I didn't know about it, and I got a call from the base commander's logistics officer, his floor, and he wanted the barracks back. And I checked with my staff. We weren't using it. It was clean. It was ready to turn over. So I said, okay. So I signed the barracks over to the general. It was his barracks anyway, right?
Right.
And then I found out that there was a battle between my colonel and the general over that barracks. So I had to make a decision, and what was I going to do about that? I try to get it back or what it would do. And I thought through all these things, and I said, you know what? I made a mistake. Even this will pass. I'll go tell the colonel. So I walked in and told the colonel what happened. He looked at me and he said, he said, it's not back until I give it back. That was it. That was it. But that's been kind of what I found throughout life, the worrying about these things. You worry about the things that you control and you can do something about. But by gosh, if it's something you can't do anything about, don't worry about. Shrug your shoulders. I made decisions as a doctor, okay? I never second guessed myself, because I was the best person at the time with the most information in that position, and it was my job to make the decision. And I made the best decision I could. Doesn't mean I was lackadaisical at all, but I didn't second guess myself on that particular decision. Okay. Doesn't mean I didn't go back and check on it on my patient either, but I don't worry about the decision, and that's what you have to do. Say anytime you're in a leadership ability, you can't worry over the decisions that you make, whether right or wrong. You made them, live with them, adjust them, make them work better for you. Same way in your life. You make a bad decision, get over it. All right, make a new decision, get on with your life.
Good words, good lessons. What legacy do you hope to leave through your work and your association with the Napoleon Hill Foundation?
Oh, I'm doing a lot of this debunking of the bloggers out there that are trying to attack my. You know why they do that, don't you? If you search Napoleon Hill, you're one of a million people every day nearly that search Napoleon Hill. So they're directed to websites, and the more hits you get, page views on a website, the more advertisers will pay you. So these bloggers make money, and if they can attract millions of people to or hundreds of thousands of people, or maybe even tens of thousands of people every single day to their website, they make more money. So the more the simplest, easiest one to talk about is, and I can talk about all of them. They make this thing about him being a lawyer, Napoleon Hill, attorney at law. He never went to law school. How can he do that? He's a con man, scam man. But the truth of the matter is, 1920 in Illinois, all you needed was a high school diploma to practice law. You didn't even need a law license till 1931. So he was doing what anybody could do legally, and many people did. But you go back at it in hindsight, and today we think you can't practice medicine without a medical degree and a license. Well, I guarantee you, 200 years ago, they didn't have that. All right. So you have to put him in his time and his place, really, to judge him. And it just goes on and on. They found some tidbit in the newspapers that they can frame a negative on him and don't bother to find out, that there was more to the story than that. So what I'm doing, I'm kind of researching him and putting it together in an area. That's what I kind of do.
I think, Eric, do you have a something you want to put up there? I see one of your little from your last presentation with Napoleon Hill standing there. But anyway, ladies and gentlemen, it is 8:00, and you want to change your life, you can pick up this book, and that's a start. And there's lots of other great books of Napoleon Hill, The Science of Personal Achievement, Napoleon Hill's greatest speeches. There are just whatever. Isn't that funny how that one fades out? I like this little one that's autographed. And go and read and go to the Napoleon Hill Foundation in Wise, Virginia, and get a tour. Heck, do you give tours over in your little office there? You're in.
Oh, no. You only see the area I cleaned up.
Well, it looks very nice. But everyone, you can be who you want to be. You have to have a definite purpose. Read the book, and let's change our lives. We can do more. You can start by just being kinder, care about everyone, pick up one piece of garbage a day, hold the door open for somebody, leave a little earlier, be nice on the roads. It starts with you. Make it a great day. Appreciate you. Thank you so much, Dr. J.B. Hill.
You are amazing.
You're amazing. Don't go away, though. We want to speak, and everybody, we're going to say goodbye, good luck, make good choices, and heck, pick up a good book to read.